An Advent voice cries out. How do we hear it? What do we hear? It seems to me, at least given the lessons for this morning, that whatever we hear, it has to do with the wilderness. From Isaiah, a voice is crying out, clear the Lord's way in the desert, make a level highway in the wilderness for our God. And from Mark, my messenger will prepare your way, a voice shouting in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord and make his paths straight. The Advent voice calls us to go clear the Lord's way in the wilderness, and the voice is already in the wilderness calling us there. Which summons will we answer? Which summons will we answer? That's my question this morning. Is the voice of Advent, the voice of God in this season of anticipation and preparation, calling us to level the wilderness so that God may move through it more easily? Or is the voice of Advent calling us into the wilderness to be changed? And so I invite you to join with me in entering wilderness this morning. I, for one, love my time in the wilderness. And in Colorado, that primarily means the mountains. We are blessed here to have 44 areas designated as wilderness. Special places where nature still calls the shots, according to the Forest Service, which goes on to say places where people can find a sense of true self-reliance and experience solitude. They are the final holdout refuges for a long list of rare, threatened, and endangered species, forced to the edges by modern development. They are the headwaters of critical, life-infusing rivers and streams. They are places where wildness is retained. For many of us, at least for me, there are places we go to see creation as it was in the beginning. They are places we go intentionally to be renewed, refreshed, changed. But that wasn't quite the case for the Israelites. As described in Harper's Bible Dictionary, a wilderness was a place that was desolate and desert, and that was beyond the limits of settlement and therefore government control. It was perceived by both city dwellers and villagers as being essentially disorderly and dangerous, the home of wild beasts and savage wandering tribes. Wilderness could be desert or scrubby wasteland, but also forested places, and as we heard this morning, it could even include water, the Jordan River. And so wilderness, for the Israelites at least, wasn't an inviting place. On the contrary, it was a place where one went reluctantly, trading one danger for another. Hagar, the Egyptian maidservant who bore Ishmael to Abraham, fled twice into the wilderness to escape the wrath of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Moses, after killing an Egyptian, fled to Midian, and while there tended flocks in the desert. Elijah fled from Queen Jezebel to the wilderness of Horeb. And of course, the big story of escape is the Exodus event, Israel's fleeing Egypt into the wilderness of Sinai. That experience turned into a hated memory, a vast and terrifying desert of poisonous snakes and scorpions, of cracked ground with no water, according to Deuteronomy. Those sojourns in the wilderness, however, weren't without benefit. That is, an encounter with God or an angel. Each time Hagar fled Abraham's household, a messenger, an angel of God, appeared to her and assured her that not only would she survive, but that her son would be the father of a great nation. It was in the desert, of course, where Moses encountered the burning bush, encountered God, who gave Moses not only God's name, I am who I am, but also commissioned Moses to bring God's people out of Egypt. It was in the wilderness where Elijah encountered God in the still, small voice that told Elijah to return to work, to anoint a king as well as his successor, Elisha. And of course, that hated memory of the wilderness of Sinai was the same wilderness where Israel became God's covenanted people. The ancients didn't enter the wilderness willingly, as I or we most often do. Their time in the wilderness, however, did result in renewal. As I mentioned, the harsh resonances of wilderness are suggested in our readings this morning. While it's difficult to hear Isaiah 40 without getting sidetracked by the great tenor solo in Handel's Messiah, Comfort, Comfort Ye My People, one of the significant features of this passage is the notion that in order for that comfort to be realized, a way needs to be made in the wilderness. Isaiah's audience, as well as later readers, would have understood this to be a reference to a royal road, a way devoid of obstacles, perhaps even made plain with paving stones. The uncivilized, disorderly, dangerous wilderness was to be made passable so that God could lead the Israelites out of their captivity in Babylon. The entry into and change to the wilderness was to be external. The language or image of a voice crying out in wilderness is picked up by Mark, but the evangelist doesn't quote Isaiah exactly. Instead of Isaiah's "a voice is crying out, clear the Lord's way in the desert, make a level highway in the wilderness for our God," Mark writes that the messenger in the wilderness, the messenger is in the wilderness, a voice shouting, "Prepare the way for the Lord, make his paths straight." That is, in Isaiah, the voice is demanding that the way be prepared in the wilderness. In Mark, the one shouting is in the wilderness. That is John the Baptist summoning others intentionally to join him there and then to be changed internally. Advent is that time in the liturgical year where we anticipate, when we prepare for the entry of God into our world in a tangible way. That preparation, I believe, might happen in several, even overlapping ways in which we are invited to participate. First, with Isaiah, I have to wonder, and I encourage you to wonder, where are the metaphorical wildernesses in our world? Where is the Advent voice urging us to clear the way, to make a level highway for God? The wildernesses around us are hard to see: homelessness, caustic civil discourse, increased loneliness. The list goes on. I hear this voice charging us to look beyond ourselves at these places of desolation. What are the barriers that prevent others from experiencing the fullness of life that God would have for them? The Advent voice asks, how do we make those rough places plain? John the Baptist, on the other hand, stands in the wilderness, calling us to come away from civilization and to address the wilderness rough places in our own lives. What prevents us from experiencing the fullness of life that God would have for us? Is it workaholism? Is it social convention? Is it pride? As one commentator put it, in the wilderness we exchange pride for humility. Therein is the chance to be renewed. The Advent voice summons people to be changed so that the one who is coming, who is stronger than John, will find a place prepared. How do we hear the Advent voice? Where might I find renewal? How am I called to prepare the way for the Lord? Which will it be? A call to change the wilderness around me, or a call to change the wilderness within me? Is it either or? Or is it both and? Amen.